Welcome to the Drake Shake, a polar podcast hosted by seasoned Antarctica expedition guide Neil Drake. With over 10 seasons guiding and 1,000 days spent on the ice, Neil will be joined by fellow guides and industry experts to share their years of experience and knowledge to help you make the most informed decision when planning your once-in-a-lifetime adventure. From picking the right itinerary to deciding when to go, we will cover it all. The Drake Shake is brought to you by Antarctica Travel Group and Let'sGoPolar.com. Now, here's your host, Neil Drake, with this week's episode.
You ready to do this? It's been a while since we've been in the studio. It feels good to be back.
Let's go.
I know it's been so long. I feel like I forgot your face. I feel like I forgot what your voice sounded like.
All right,
so
let's jump.
Neil's voice lives in my head rent free, pretty much 24/7.
All right,
no reminders needed.
Let's get started.
Okay.
No more bullying. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Drake Shake podcast. My name is Neil, and as always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Nikki. How's it going, Nick?
It is so good. I am in the middle of the ocean right now, which is really exciting, and I didn't ever think that I would be recording a podcast from the middle of the ocean. So it's a very cool day.
When we last left off, we discussed you were leaving for a trip and now you're on the trip. Mm-hmm. We've missed an episode. We apologize to everybody, but also I was on a trip. But it's nice to be back in the studio. It's nice to get back with everybody and do this again. I actually missed this while we were traveling. And it's just been so hard because I was actually in Southeast Asia for 3 weeks. You are on the Hondius right now with Ocean Wide. You're doing one of these epic adventures. And then trying to coordinate my time zone with your time zone and then our special guest time zone has just been challenging. So hard.
Yeah, there were a few opportunities where it was like, okay, I could wake up at 4 a.m., but that's like 10 p.m. for you, and that's not really convenient for anybody. So we have genuinely been trying. It's just been hard. But now we're here, so it's all good.
Can we comment on the fact that you are literally in the middle of the ocean on a ship right now and you've got better Wi-Fi than I do?
Welcome to the future, man. Yeah, satellite internet has the games.
Ooh, I know that voice. I think our guests know that voice. Who's that?
Who could it be?
Who's our special guest today?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can just say that I feel honored and so welcome to be here another time on the Drake Shake podcast. It is just such a pleasure to see both of you and to engage in these conversations. I came out of the last podcast and was just so stoked all day just because, we came off of that high of just having a really good conversation with friends about things that we love to do. And it was just like, it's so cool. And I think it's such a cool thing what we're doing here. And just to see this thing launch has been awesome. You guys have been doing such a great job. So let's go. Round 2. My name is Phil Hunter, by the way.
Phil Hunter, welcome to the show.
Hunter.
Yeah, you're, the majority of our listeners from the get-go before we actually are getting a lot of traction now. We got well over 3,000 downloads in our first couple episodes, but most of the people who listened to the episode from the start were the ones that have been on our trips, and you and I work so many together. So we had so many messages. You got them. There were people making group chats thanking us for doing it because it was like getting the tag team back together, and it was just, it's been good. It's been really good. I've been super happy with it. I don't believe that just because we have a return guest that we shouldn't do a cold opener. I mean, we still need one, right? I mean, we get so many compliments on the banter. People love the banter. They really do. And I think it's great, right? Because it shows our relationships with one another.
Yeah.
In our cold opener, we discussed how you named the podcast, right?
It went from the Drake Passes to the Drake Shake fairly quickly in that conversation.
You named the podcast. Can you think of anything that I may have named?
Come on. Well, all right. I'll say it to the people. We were thinking about our first child, about good names for our son Bowden. We were thinking of Bodie, and we had a bunch of names on the table, and we sat down with Neil. He came over to our place and we were just sitting and kind of like working through this whole thought process of, hey, we want Bodie, but we want him to have a really strong name. So we just kind of batted around a couple ideas. And Neil said, what about Bowden? Is that how it went? I think you suggested the name out, right?
Well, Well, we were sitting around. We were sitting around with you, me, my wife, and your wife, and we were sitting around. And Amanda was pregnant. We were talking about baby names. We knew it was a boy. We wanted a strong name. We liked the idea of a Nordic name. I remember that because of our polar work.
Mm-hmm.
And Bodhi was good. And I was getting flashbacks to like Point Break, and Bodhi's awesome. So I was like, oh, it's a good, strong name.
Yeah.
And then we were looking up the meaning of the names and what they actually, because that's a big thing too. And then Bowden came up and I just threw it out there. And it stuck. So you officially named your son, but I definitely threw some.
You planted a seed there, Neil, and you know I'm so glad you did, because we obviously liked Bowden and named our son that, and he is just such a ball of energy now, and we call him Bo, and little Bo is just a rocket. He's going to preschool now, if you can believe it. So
God, it happened so fast. So you named the podcast. I named your kid. I think we're even.
Same.
You both named each other's babies.
Yeah. Aw, that's sweet.
All right, let's get into the episode. What are we talking about today? We're going to talk about all of the different itineraries that we can experience in the polar regions. We're going to focus on Antarctica this time. We're going to do a whole episode about this for the Arctic independently, because it's an entirely different beast. But right now, let's talk about the itineraries that we see when planning our trips to Antarctica, because I suspect, and I hope people leave comments on this, the most overwhelming part about picking your trip is picking the itinerary. And it's getting more and more complicated these years, because now there are so many different terms for these itineraries, and companies are starting to try and differentiate themselves from one another by creating all these terms and names for the itineraries that at the end of the day is nothing more than just a marketing term. So we're going to sort of break that down a little bit, and we're going to simplify it in a way that shouldn't cause anybody any stress. Because I really think that, you know, when do you want to go? That's a pretty easy decision to make once you've established what you want to see or what your time off allows. That's a pretty easy one. Your budget is already pretty much established. And when it comes down to ship and company, we're going to talk about that in some future episodes. I think the itinerary is probably the most overwhelming for people. So let's start to break that down a little bit for our listeners. What do you say? You in for that?
I think it's a grand idea. Let's do it.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Too easy. All right, you guys are great. Yeah. Look,
super agreeable.
Here's what it comes down to. And Nikki, you do this on a daily basis. Like, that's your whole job of working in sales, is that you are helping people pick their itineraries. And there's a lot of, like we see with a lot of the other things, there's a lot of misinformation out there. But at the end of the day, what does it come down to? It comes down to, are you going to go to Antarctica by itself, or are you going to add South Georgia and the Falklands to your itinerary? That's it, right? That makes up 90% of the itineraries, 95%. There are some outliers. We talk about the Ross Sea. We talk about Snow Hill. We talk about the helicopter trips, you know, things like that. That makes up the other 5 or 7% of the itineraries out there. And I feel like if you're looking at one of those trips, you kind of already know what you're looking for. So this applies to the 90% of the other people who are trying to decide between Antarctica alone or Antarctica plus South Georgia. And that's sort of it, right? Once you've made the decision between which of the two you're going to do, then there's all these sub itineraries that come along with it. And that's sort of what we can kind of break down. So let's start from the Antarctica only side of things.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So ready. I've got all these thoughts swirling in my head. Let me get them out, Neil. I really want to chat about this.
This is you, right? When you've EL'd every itinerary under the sun. For those who don't know, ELing means to be the expedition leader. You've been an expedition leader. You've guided on every itinerary. When it comes to planning a trip to Antarctica, what are the sort of main differences in the itineraries?
You have time of year. We talked about that. There's a difference between the time of year. You know, if you go in early season or late season, if you want to learn more about that, refer back to the earlier episode in the Drake Shake catalog of podcasts. But when we talk about Antarctica, there are a lot of trips that go down to the Antarctic Peninsula, the West Antarctic Peninsula, and the Gerlache Strait. You can think of that as downtown Antarctica. You go down there and you pass the South Shetland Islands, which is this group of barrier islands off the western coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, and you end up in the Gerlache Strait, which is the classic huge mountains coming straight out of the water, covered in glaciers. You have whales and penguin colonies and all of this stuff. And you'll see that most Antarctic Peninsula trips will focus on that region. There's a lot of ships that go down there during the bulk of the season. And you'll see ships doing these 9-day, 10-day, 11-day itineraries down to the Gerlache Strait. And they really do focus on that with a little pit stop in at the South Shetlands, which can be really valuable, though occasionally you get some weather there more often than you would on the Gerlache Strait area of the Antarctic Peninsula. There is another region further south than that, and we call that the area past the Antarctic Circle, Marguerite Bay, Crystal Sound. All of these areas are further south. You do cross the Antarctic Circle. It takes an extra day of sailing to get there. But once you're down there, I mean, the area seems to open up. Less ships go down there because it requires more time. But that is an amazing place. You get huge tabular icebergs. You get different kinds of wildlife. You see a lot of the same stuff, but you end up seeing more, say, Adelie penguins, if you're into that kind of thing. And that whole region is so fun to travel to, but not many trips go there because it is a bit further and requires more engagement from the guests. So the Gerlache Strait trips are what we see most companies selling throughout the year. And then you have your add-ons to South Georgia.
You're pretty much summarizing like 80% of every trip that visits Antarctica, regardless of what it's being marketed as or being sold as. They're all going to mostly go to the Gerlache Strait, the western side of the peninsula, the cookie cutter highlights of the best of the best. There's a reason we go there. It's because we have the most accessible landing sites, the most dense wildlife. But here's the thing where I think a lot of people get confused is that, like we mentioned before, because of these marketing terms where companies are trying to separate themselves from one another, you're getting all of these different terminologies for the exact same trip. If you see something labeled as discovering the great white continent and you see something else that says like unearthing the last frontier on Earth, like it's the exact same thing. That's the exact same thing, right?
You're going to go to the same places. You're going to have the same number of stops. You're seeing the same penguins on both trips.
It's frustrating for us now as agents because we're trying to keep up with what the terminology that they're putting out is. And at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It used to be classic Antarctica, extended Antarctica, circle crossing Antarctica. That was basically it. And it came down to just how many days you were there. Now there's all these new terminologies, but because like, let's look at a trip from Quark has something called like a penguin safari, right? There's no difference between that trip labeled penguin safari and any other trip that's going to do the same itinerary with another company because you're going to see the exact same things. You're going to see the exact same penguins. And it kind of gives this false comparative where you think that you're going to see way more penguins on that penguin safari than you will see on another trip. You're not going to. It's the same itinerary, which is a different name. Something like they might advertise their March trips as like whale watching trips. I don't like that because it sort of emphasizes that you're going to only be whale watching. You're going to be doing the exact same thing you'd be doing on a classic Antarctica trip earlier in the season, except you're going to see more whales. That's the difference.
You know, the thing that changes is the focus on board. You know, there's the educational programs on board can be exceptional. You know, you can drive a lot of value through the interactions that you have with the guides that you have on your expedition. They can bring special guests on. You can have special speakers, and that's great. What you're focusing on and what you're saying does not change all that radically between one itinerary and the other, right? It's exactly the same stuff.
Exactly. And I was going to bring this up when we started talking about South Georgia itineraries, because you'll have an itinerary that's just one company will sell it as a 19-day Antarctica, South Georgia, Falklands trip. That's what it's just being marketed as. And another company might market it as like in Shackleton's footsteps, right? It's the exact same trip. You're going to go do the exact same things on both those trips. But like you said, maybe the content on board, we have like educational curators on board. They're usually the assistant expedition leaders or somebody specifically designed to build the curriculum on board. You might have a more history focused curriculum on the Shackleton trip versus a regular trip. But at the same time, you're going to the same places. Maybe they'll prioritize visiting Fortuna Bay and Stromness, but every ship tries to go there too. That might be the only thing. Visiting Shackleton's grave is mandatory for every trip because we have to visit Grytviken. So you're saying exactly what I think confuses people. You're bringing it up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's a focus on the narrative. You're trying to weave that storyline into the course of the trip. You get people that do like going on the In Shackleton's Footsteps trips because they have a connection to the story, which is brilliant, and it's so fun to talk about. And on these trips, you might get an extra Shackleton lecture. You might take a certain course around the Southern Ocean. You might go to Antarctica first, and then you could go to Elephant Island, go visit Point Wild, and then go to South Georgia, and then the Falklands, rather than going Falklands, South Georgia, Antarctica. You can go clockwise or counterclockwise, around to these places, because you are effectively doing a circle around an area of the Southern Ocean called the Scotia Sea. So it's a bit of a tomato, right? If you're if you're not necessarily so invested in the history portion, going to South Georgia on a not in Shackleton step trip is going to be more or less the same trip. I mean, I feel like we're saying the same thing over and over. We're going to the same places.
Yeah. And we're gonna there's just not enough time in an episode to literally break down every single one of the itineraries. So we're trying to give everybody sort of the generalization of what to start looking for. Nikki, when you're working with clients and you're trying to book some trips, how is it for you navigating all of these different itineraries with all these new terminologies and stuff like that? What do you really look for?
More or less, I've been kind of, I don't want to say ignoring the fancy marketing terms that have kind of come to be, but I'm paying more attention to when someone tells me how much time they have. That's a pretty big thing. If someone only has, 10 days that they're able to take off, we can't do a circle trip. We can't do a South Georgia trip. We can only do a classic trip. And I know what to look for with that. So that's one of the main things, is how much time people are able to take off. And then just asking what sort of things they're interested in seeing, what they're excited about, and of course their budget, and kind of going from there. But like you guys have said, and we're probably going to say it a million times, there's really 4 or 5 main categories that we can work within. And all of the extra fluff is just that. It's fluff. It's like a baby penguin. It's fluffy.
So we talked about pretty much that's the western side of the peninsula. Those are your cookie cutter. Those are your, like Nikki said, your classic 10-dayers, right? Then you're going to have some more in-depth trips that are 11, 12, 13 days. And these are usually sold as Antarctica in-depth or extended Antarctica or Antarctica extreme, something along those lines. There's some terminology for those. So those, again, they're going to be the exact same trips that you would get as a classic. You're just 2 or 3 or 4 more days on the peninsula. I don't think people really go more than 7 days on the peninsula. And if you ask any one of us who has been there 100+ times, like 4 days on the peninsula is more than enough time. It really is. That's another thing that we run into. People say things like, I want as much time down there as possible. But then the budget starts to become a question. And you're like, trust me, 4 days on the peninsula is a lot to see and a lot of time. The main advantage to having more time on the peninsula is that if you run into a weather system, you have more flexibility. That's the main advantage, right? And even on a 4-day trip, if you run a bad weather system, you're usually getting 1 or 2 days of bad weather. You've got a great captain, expedition leader on board. They're moving you around. It's not uncommon to have a couple days canceled. That's actually pretty par for the course. I'd say at least 1 day canceled is kind of par. 2 days is bad luck. 3 or 4 is so unlikely that it's hard to even consider. But that's the main advantage. The other main advantage is on the longer trips, they're either they're going to cross the circle. And so we're looking at classic trips that don't cross the circle. We're looking at 9, 10, 11, or 12 days. There are some longer, like 13-day trips that won't cross the circle. Those are usually your base camp trips that are ocean-wide offers. Or Aurora's, they have the all-inclusive activity. They're making it an extended classic Antarctica trip because you need more time to allow people to participate in the activities if you run into weather. But a 13-day classic Antarctica trip, you just don't really see it because it's a lot of time to be on the peninsula. And I don't want to use the word repetitive, but it is sort of like it's the same thing.
A lot of time. It's a lot of time, right? And after those trips, I can tell you, having worked a couple of those trips, it's exhausting, right? You are worked after the end of your 7th and 8th day in a row of operations. Because remember, you're getting up, you're going outside, you're putting on all your gear, and then you're subjecting yourself to whatever conditions you have. And some days it's bright and it's sunny and it's chill and you're doing a Zodiac cruise. And other days, it's perfect weather and you're outside and it takes effort to go and do these things. And Nikki, you can probably speak to this after being on the ocean, even being on a ship gets you tired because you're dealing with the motion of the vessel and all the rest. Like just being on the Drake Passage can be work. So we always say on expedition that these are not holidays. You're on an expedition now. So that's our big amp 'em up, typical expedition leader speak at the welcome briefing when you get on board. I'm glad you mentioned the activities thing, Neil. If you want to participate in the sea kayaking program, but also want to do other things, and maybe a longer trip is a good call. There are specialty voyages out there, like you say, that do focus on activities and stuff, and that can be great. There's different flavors to the thing, but you're still eating, an ice cream sundae at the end of the day,
right? watching your brain figure out what to say right after you're eating was really entertaining. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. An ice cream sandwich is perfect.
We should have used that as our cold opener, eh? We should just ice cream references all the way through.
So it's kind of summarize, this side of things, right? Again, we're trying to explain to people that when you decide how much time you have and your budget allows, if you've got a budget to go on a long extended trip and you got the time to do it and you're okay with just staying down in Antarctica, like, go nuts. That's awesome. I mean, it's more power to you. You're going to get to see more places, stuff like that. But if your budget's very constrained, a 10-day classic Antarctica is a great, great trip. There is nothing shortcoming about that trip at all. That's what we run most of our charters as. There's a reason that companies make that pretty much 70% of their entire, repertoire for the season is classic Antarctica. It's, it's good for them to turn and burn, get more trips, more clients and stuff, but they offer great experiences. Then you got your more extended ones. And then the circle crossing trips. We talked about this a little bit in the when to go episode. Those are going to be typically January, February into like early March. You will see circle crossing trips be a minimum, I think, of 11 or 12 days. The ones that are like 10 days are really tricky. It's too much time transiting to get to the circle and you're losing out on expedition days. They don't understand the distance you need to travel. And then you have to make a landing in the morning. If you even make a landing, a lot of those trips, we call them yo-yo circle crossings, where you go down, you cross a line on the map, you do a ceremony, and then you turn around, you go back up. 13-day trips in the circle, 14-day trips in the circle. Those ones are better for circle crossing trips. Like Phil mentioned, getting down to like Marguerite Bay and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot for sure. I've been on those trips where you cross a circle, you make an announcement, you do champagne toast, you look at some ice, and then you head back north, right? And that usually happens when you have some weather constraints or some environmental constraints, like too much sea ice, and you can't approach the one island there is to go to once you cross a circle. I mean, it's 100 miles from the bottom of the Le Maire, which is what we consider the bottom of the Gerlache Strait. So it takes time to sail down there. And I don't think people realize that, 100 miles is a lot of ground to cover for a ship. Our average cruising speed is like 12 miles an hour. These ships
and then we get into whale zones and we have to go half that.
Yeah, you have to do a max 10 knots in the geofence zones, and that's a whole separate topic. But the environmental protections around the peninsula would be such a cool episode because we could really dive deep into that stuff.
So that kind of covers the western side of the peninsula, which is the vast majority of the trips that people are going to go down to. Then we've got the eastern side of the peninsula where we're talking about the Antarctic Sound and the Weddell Sea. So that's sort of the other branch. We branched it off from you're going to South Georgia or not, like where you're just going to the peninsula. Now you're going down to the peninsula and you're looking at, are you doing western side of the peninsula or are you going to do the eastern side of the peninsula? You've got the Weddell Sea, depends on who you ask how to say it. And you have, how do you say it, Phil?
I say the Weddell.
Do you?
I say we're going down to the Weddell Sea.
Maybe I say them both back and forth. I don't know. The Weddell Sea, I say the Weddell Seal and the Weddell Sea. So
yeah, that's tough. That's hard to justify. So, it's just, how do you feel that day, right? That's what it comes down to.
So to give people an understanding, that's just the other side of the peninsula. That's the eastern side. You typically visit that side on South Georgia itineraries unless it's specified that you're going to be going to the western side, mainly due to just the distance that you need to cover. If you go look at a map, everybody should just pause this episode, go look at a map, go see where South Georgia and the Falklands are, and then go look where the eastern side of the peninsula is versus the western side of the peninsula. It's much more logistically strategic to visit the Weddell Sea and the Antarctic Sound when you're going to do a South Georgia and Falklands itinerary on top of that. And it's amazing. The first time I ever went to Antarctica, I did the western side of the peninsula. Second time I went down, again, I was a guest on all these trips. On my second trip, it was also a western side. The weather was so bad that we were going up and around and we were going to go to the Weddell Sea. And I had not fully understood it yet. And there were some travel agents on board. And I asked them what that meant. And they were like, oh, that's a treat. This is awesome. This is really cool. The Weddell Sea is really unique in its own right. We got the big tabular icebergs. That's what we're going for. We got, I think, a bit more fin whale versus humpback whale. That's a little bit of an eastern side of thing.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. There's so much to see in the Weddell Sea, and the cool part about this is that you have the entire Weddell Sea down below, and we say the Weddell Sea, but it's really just the northwestern tip of the Weddell Sea. Like we're scooting down into it with our little boat and then shooting right out, because Weddell Sea is just covered in sea ice throughout the year. So there's a huge Weddell Sea gyre that pushes sea ice up past that tip. And what we don't typically see throughout the season is sea ice on the Antarctic Peninsula. And that's a whole different marine environment into itself. So you see penguins on the ice. You see lots of whales feeding around it because sea ice leads to really nutrient-rich waters surrounding those areas. So you see a lot of whales feeding. You see a lot of penguins feeding. And because of that, you have these massive Adelie penguin colonies in the Antarctic Sound, which are just fantastic to see. There's a lot of historical context as well around Northern Shoal expeditions and the rest. So there's a lot to dig into. But the one thing I hear about the Weddell Sea that people miss is the scenery. Right, it's not the same scenery that you would get on the West Antarctic Peninsula. So you're not seeing those big mountains covered in glaciers. It's not the classic Antarctic look. And because of that, when I've had to dive into the Weddell Sea and show people that side of Antarctica, it's a really rich experience. But the feedback I've gotten on trips where that's happened is that, hey, we've loved this, but we didn't see the postcard that we thought we'd see.
When you're getting email requests from people, do you ever hear people specifically requesting the Weddell Sea?
No, not really. I don't think a lot of people know what that is. I don't think a lot of people have even really heard of it. I think when most people think about going down, they know about the western side. That's what most of the trips make up. So I don't think a lot of people know what the Weddell or the Weddell Sea even is. Learning.
I don't even think a lot of people even understand that there is a difference between the two. And I don't mean that to say people are uneducated or uninformed. I think it's just, they're just saying, I want to go visit the Antarctic Peninsula and I'm trusting that the company's going to take me to the best place to go. And a lot of times the itineraries are offered sometimes specifically as a Weddell Sea trip or an Antarctic Sound trip. And I think that's, a lot of times to maybe capture an audience who had already been to the peninsula in the past and they want to show them something completely different. I think that's a really good option. But also, I'm going to kind of encourage people, if you see the opportunity to join on one of those trips and it's in your budget and it's in your time frame, I would absolutely consider jumping on one of those because you are going to see a lot less boats down there, a lot less ships. You're going to have a lot more landing opportunities. There's continental landings over there as well. There's heaps of Adelie penguins. You're going to get all the other species as well. If it's an early trip, you've got a higher chance of maybe seeing the elusive emperor penguin. That's rare, very rare, but it's possible. Don't be afraid of those trips just because it's not downtown Antarctica. They're absolutely incredible, I think. And I think one of the reasons that ships don't offer them as often is because it's a little bit further to travel and it's a little limiting now on activities with the bird flu concerns. But that's sort of your main other Antarctica itinerary. You've got, if you're going to the western side or the eastern side, when you're going to the western side, we're talking about days. 9 is kind of the minimum unless you're doing one of the A21 express trips. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's about what you're going to see for a peninsula only trip. And then from there, they kind of branch out. There are some other things, right? And I don't want to totally knock the differences in itineraries from strictly a marketing standpoint, because there are companies who are out there differentiating themselves by actually offering different itineraries outside the norm. Oceanwide is really good at doing this. They're offering a lot more diversity in their itineraries. They've got their base camp trips. They kind of pioneered that. And a couple of companies are falling in line to that. That's your all-inclusive activities trips. They're also doing much deeper south. I think they set the record. Oceanwide set the record for the deepest the ship has gone.
Can I update that?
Yeah. Did you go deeper?
It was Ponant and then Aurora recently on their Antarctica epic trip got to the deepest south point ever by a ship, and that was in February. So they've actually just submitted that to the Guinness World Book of Records. They beat the record by something like 200 meters.
Oh my goodness!
So book it. We did it, y'all. Send it to the record books. But they did it.
I mean, you got to respect Oceanwide for kind of pioneering that or giving that, giving other companies a point to achieve and pass, right?
Yeah.
And then, Oceanwide also, they're doing their Aurora trips. You don't see a lot of those being offered. So, what I love about Oceanwide's offerings is you go on their website and there is no fancy names for anything. It's just, here's what we're doing and here's where we're going and here's how many days we're doing it. They're clean. It's easy to book. Poseidon is very good at that. When you go to Poseidon's website, you're looking at itineraries. It's just, here is a list of where we're going and how long the trip is going to be. Antarply, same way. So you start looking at companies, Quark, Aurora, some of these other companies that are trying to stand out. The marketing terms are making it more confusing than it is. If you're listening to this podcast and you work for one of those companies, here's some feedback for you. I'm trying to be honest with you. I'm not trying to knock you. I get why you're doing what you're doing. But at the same time, even from an agent standpoint, it's making it really confusing for us, especially when we're searching for trips. Like I got to go to Quark's website and I want to just find an Antarctica trip that's somewhere between 10 and 14 days because that's what the client has. And I got to search through 19 different itineraries that are all sort of the same thing, just a different amount of days. It's making it more confusing for us. It's making it more confusing for them.
Can I ask you a question, Neil?
Absolutely.
With Let's Go Polar, how do you guys simplify that for people that go to that website and look through the trips? What are ways that someone that's looking at all these different itineraries might find that their experience on Let's Go Polar leads them to the answer that they're actually looking for?
We're constantly trying to find ways to simplify it, but we have to honor the companies when we list them on our website. We give them the same itinerary names and stuff like that. But we did create a filter on our website where people can start to break down region, budget, trip duration. And I can't stress this enough. We covered this in the episode about working with a travel agent. We can save you so much of the guesswork. You can go through, you can browse some trips on our website. Just reach out to us. Tell us how many days you want to travel. Tell us what your budget is, and we'll put together some itineraries for you. We'll take the guesswork out of it, because here's what's important. There's also something about understanding itineraries that I think people miss a lot when they're booking trips. We talked about this prior to the show, Phil, actually just discussing it in general, but not every itinerary is identical in days. There are certain companies that will tell you it's a 12-day trip, but it's still just 4 days on the peninsula because you've got a day in Buenos Aires with the charter flight. And then you got a day in Ushuaia. And then day 3 is embarking. Day 4 and 5 are in the Drake Passage. Day 6 of your 12-day itinerary, you're finally in Antarctica. Where if you go with a company like we talked about Oceanwide, we talked about Antarply, these are trips that are very much sort of, I don't want to call them bare bones because they're not bare bones trips, but they don't have all this.
Straightforward.
Great word. Yes. Straightforward. If they say it's a 10-day trip, it's a 10-day trip from start to finish, and you get the same amount of time on the peninsula as you would with a 12-day trip. And a lot of times this gets missed by people, and we bring it to their attention. They go, oh, well, I saw this trip. It's 12 days. I get more time in the peninsula. And you're like, hold on a second. That's not actually the case. So I can't stress it enough how important and how valuable it is to work with a travel agent who does this every single day for dozens of people a day. And by now we just have it memorized to the point where we can just save a lot of time.
For
but
sure.
If you're,
what I do want to point out is that we're not trying to represent other companies that do add days to their itineraries as being deceptive in any way, right?
Correct. Not at all.
They often do add a service. They're often, booking charter flights and getting people down in the same place. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. So if you're looking through that, then there it is. That product exists, but they rightfully add those days onto the itinerary because that's when you enter into their duty of care, right?
Great. I'm glad you brought that up I'm glad that you made a note on that, because it's true. We're not trying to discredit anybody because it's not malicious. It's not deceptive. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's just like you said, that's part of the itinerary. That's the trip. It's just when you go to a trip and you look at the itinerary broken down, just count how many days you're doing landings. That's really what it comes down to understand what the itinerary is. Certain itineraries, like we said, there are all these caveats or all these branch outs that we can talk about. We don't have enough time in an episode, but if you look at things like a fly trip where it's a 10-day fly trip, go look at the day in the hotel, then the day of the flight, then the embarkation stuff. You do get more days on those flights, and we're going to do a whole fly trip episode. So it really comes down to how many days are you doing landings. That's the most important thing when booking an itinerary. And again, if you say to us, hey, I'm okay with 4 days, but I would like to have a charter flight. I would like to have an included hotel, and it becomes a 12-day itinerary. We have that option also. So great point, Phil, really. The other thing is we have these sort of, I would say, themed trips. These ones are also a bit of a standout. These are things like Aurora has a women's only trip, right? We have Polar Latitudes is doing like a halal trip, photography trips, like trips that are solely focused on photography. These are always mentioned in the itinerary. But again, let's reiterate. These trips will not do anything different than a trip of the same itinerary with a different name. They're just going to have a theme to them. Can you think of other examples?
Yep. There's a lot of Asian focused trips. That's a big one. We get that quite often. We see a lot of birding special trips. That is a very big one. Like you mentioned, the whale watching ones. That's all I can think of right now.
By Asian focused trips, you mean like charters, like group charters, or
No, they're actually being sold and marketed to the open public as an Asian focused trip.
Cool.
Yeah, it's just they talk about the culinary options are going to be more Asian focused. They're going to have multiple language translations. They don't sell it as a single Asian culture, but they're going to have more. Yeah, so that's being offered a little bit now too.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Because we typically see Asian charters, not Asian open market sales, right? That's sort of a big thing. So when you look at the itineraries, there's so many different lanes that you can pick, but it's way more simple than I think people are understanding when it comes down to it. We have some other outliers. You know, you got something like, if you want something super adventurous, you can jump on the Bark Europa. Like that just doesn't follow any other norm. But at the same time, you're going to the same places. You're just on a sailboat, you know, you're crossing it. You know, so there's those things too. South Georgia. We talked about the peninsula, you know, South Georgia, same thing. The main differences between a South Georgia itinerary that you need to look at, again, how many days are you doing landings? Are you going to visit the Falklands or skip the Falklands? Are you going to even visit the peninsula? Because there's that also. There's Falkland, South Georgia only. You could skip the peninsula. But for the most part, most trips are Falkland, South Georgia, Antarctica. 19 to 22 days. Jeff and I went through this. And the other difference is, are you going to go clockwise or counterclockwise? That's really sort of what we look at.
South Georgia is famous for having weather systems blow over the entire island and really kind of shut down landings for a morning or for a day. So if you're there and you only have 3 days and you get weather for 1 day or 2 days, then your South Georgia experience all of a sudden becomes pretty curtailed. I would recommend spending more days in South Georgia because it's just such a valuable place, and you're getting there. You might as well spend the extra couple of days in South Georgia, really truly experiencing the place because it is just that amazing.
And I think for the most part, most itineraries will include 4 days in South Georgia specifically for that reason. There are a very few itineraries that will only do 3 days there. Definitely rolling the dice a little bit on it. But if that's all you've got, it's worth the gamble, I think. That 15-day trip that we're talking about, it skips the Falklands. It's a tough itinerary because it's 9 sea days for 6 days of landings. It's a lot of sailing. I want to say that we try to definitely be openly transparent about those itineraries, but we put a bunch of people on it this season and every single person came back from it completely stoked. We didn't get one complaint about it at all. Nikki, how was the feedback from that trip in?
My God, amazing. Everyone who's written in was absolutely, completely, 100% blown away. Like you were just saying, no one left that feeling poorly.
And it's hard I think it's hard for us, from people who do the longer itineraries with more time in South Georgia, to look at that trip and say, well, that's not as robust of an itinerary in South Georgia. But then at the same time, these people have probably never been before, and this is the only trip that they're going to see South Georgia in. And so at the end of the day, that's completely mind blowing. And if the weather works, it's a great option. It's more affordable. It's more affordable than most of all the South Georgia itineraries. It's also allowing people who might not have 3 weeks off to take the trip because it's more of a 15-day trip versus a 20-day trip. So if you're interested in that one, definitely reach out to us. It's a really good opportunity to see South Georgia on a budget. The other things with South Georgia that are very, very, very rare, South Georgia and crossing the circle. We get that request a lot. People say, I want to cross the circle and I want to go to South Georgia. And I'll say, I think a lot of times what's happening is people think that the whole Antarctica experience is happening below the circle. They just hear Antarctic Circle and they say, okay, I got to cross the circle to get to Antarctica. So they're just saying, oh, and I want to cross the Antarctica Circle, not realizing that predominantly all of the landing sites in Antarctica or north of the circle. You know what I mean? I think that they don't realize that it's two separate regions and that north of the circle is actually more visited than below the circle.
So once you dig into it and you see that it's a 27, 30-day trip, you're like, well, hey, what's going on here?
And it's $40,000. It's $40,000.
They're really
expensive.
pricey. So it appeals to a certain segment. And I think those people are, really well informed about, spending that kind of money and what they're getting back for their investment. And it's a huge trip, but you do get to see this sort of completion of a journey take place. And when you do that, when you spend that much time with the staff, then you get to hear all of these stories and you get to really dive deep into what the nuts and bolts of the history and the ecology and all the different species that you see along the way. There's just so much ground to cover, and over the course of a trip, there's often not enough time to really say all the things we're just so stoked to say to people. But on that kind of trip, I can imagine that sort of sorts itself out. So if you're invested, if you're really trying to go down and get one of these like complete Antarctic experiences, they're out there and they're cool, but it's a lot, and it's just a small subsection of people that will be taking that trip, but enough so that a couple companies can offer a product like that.
And I'm going to slightly disagree with the first thing you said in that rant, only because you said that the people who are looking at these trips most likely know what they're invested in, or they know what they're looking for. I actually don't think that that's necessarily the case for everybody, if even the majority, because like I said, I think people just associate the Antarctica Circle with just the region of Antarctica itself. So when they write in, they say, I want to go to South Georgia, the Falklands, and cross the circle. What they're really trying to say is, I just want to visit Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falklands, because we just ran into this with one of our guests, where we kind of said, hey, there's only 8 or 10 of those offerings a season across the industry in general. It's not like these are normal trips. Not a lot of people even offer them, because in order to cross the circle, you have to go to the western side of the peninsula, which we discussed is so far away from South Georgia. They're expensive and they're long. And then we sort of explained to them, but hold on, what they really wanted to do, they didn't really want to cross the circle. They just wanted to visit Antarctica, and they thought that the circle was Antarctica. So we have to reel people back in for that a little bit too. And then we run into the case where some people start to decide, well, do I want to cross the circle or do I want to visit South Georgia? And then my sales pitch for that is pretty straightforward. Phil, if it came to crossing the circle or going to South Georgia, which would you pick?
It's an easy answer. If you can stomach the extra, 5 days to a week longer, then absolutely South Georgia every time.
It's not even a question. I mean, I don't want to knock the circle. I understand the significance to people. Maybe they visited the Arctic Circle, now they want to cross the Antarctic Circle. So if the circle becomes time constraining or financially constraining, I would give up the circle. It's a line on a map. There are some cool things to see below it. You get the rare opportunity of like a Ross seal. That's about the main highlight. And then you get to say you cross the circle. It's a cool trip. I like it's a little longer. You get to spend more time with your friends. It's very beautiful down there. But the majority of the wildlife, the majority of the accessible landing sites, all of that is north of the circle. That's just sort of the unfortunate truth of the dynamics of the way the peninsula is laid out. We didn't build it that way. It's just the way it is.
For sure. And that's what I don't think people realize is that, the number of actual feasible landing sites on the peninsula itself, this huge geographic area, is so minimal. We're talking about like 1% of the available coastline is actually coastline that we can land on.
You have a number? I tried to think about this the other day.
How many landing sites there are? We could go to ICO. They've got stuff that pops up, but some of it is just like when an expedition leader goes and books a site, you see a dot on a map that you can click on and say, yes, my ship wants to go here. And sometimes, you have stuff that is a well-known landing site or even lesser known, but other times you get there and it's not much. It's a rocky outcropping, and that's that.
It's just a place to go. Yeah, you're right. I mean,
yeah. When you're running from weather, when you're looking for shelter, maybe you go and book one of those spots, right?
Maybe you go to Vega Island.
Maybe you go to Vega. Well,
if you can't tell, Phil and I have a history of Vega Island. That was a rough trip. We had nowhere to go. There was no weather. There was no available landing sites. And we went to this place called Vega Island. I think that we were one of maybe 2 ships to visit there in the last 10 years because nobody goes there, but it was the only place that we could get to. Phil, you were driving some people in and you said, if you want to be the first person in history to ever do something and you do it on this island, you will be the first person in history to ever do this. And I think people were...
No one goes there.
No one goes there. So we saw people doing a cartwheel and they were like, I'm the first person in history and likely the only person ever in history to do a cartwheel on Vega Island. And then we had a proposal on Vega Island. That was cool. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you had said that he had wanted to propose in the peninsula. We had bad weather. We couldn't make a landing, so we went to Vega, and he did it there. He was going to wait to do it in South Georgia, but he ended up doing it in Vega because he said, I'm going to be the only person in history for now and forever to ever propose on Vega Island. So point being, there are landing sites all over the place. We do have, like, I would say our top 15 that everybody wants to try and get to, but it's growing in popularity. There's a lot of ships down there. So be flexible with it too. This could be the longest episode ever talking about itineraries, but we're coming up on an hour. I do want to kind of put a little bow on this. It's it's not as complicated as everybody makes it out to be, I think. Really, it just comes down to, are you going to South Georgia or not? And if you are not going to South Georgia, how many days do you want to spend in the peninsula? What activities are you the most interested in participating in? Are you open to visiting either side of the peninsula? Do you want to cross the circle? And do you want to potentially fly? I mean, that would be the nuts and bolts of picking an itinerary. When we talk to our clients in emails, we just kind of ask those top 8 questions and we can almost narrow it down to maybe 4 or 5 options. It's really not that complicated. And there's no difference between most of these itineraries. Like I said, there are some standouts. There are some unique ones, or themed ones. And, you know, when we talk to you about some options, we'll break those down for you. We'll talk to our guests about, you know, what that is. And then if you're going to go to South Georgia, I mean, do you want to go clockwise or counterclockwise? We did the episode with Jeff. Both of us had a preference. Do you have a preference, counterclockwise or clockwise?
I like going to Antarctica first.
Me too. I do too.
Mm-hmm. I like wrapping up in the Falklands. I think that puts a really nice bow on things.
Liked it because I always felt it'd be underwhelming if you saw all of that wildlife in South Georgia and then you went to the peninsula next.
The peninsula sticks out for different reasons, of course. The thing is, South Georgia is in the middle of the itinerary, no matter what you do. So you have this huge, you know, culmination of people's expectations, and you actually see the place and you're like, wow, that blew my expectations out of the water. You're going to have the peninsula after that, or you're going to have the Falklands after that, no matter what you do. That's never going to be at the end of your trip. So that's always going to be a factor, right?
I do like going Antarctica first because I think starting the trip with the Drake Passage is really morale building, even if it's a good Drake or a bad Drake. But I feel you cross the Drake, you arrive there, everybody on board feels like they just went through this together. It's a great start to the trip. It's a lot of content to receive. And then from there, it's I don't want to say it's smooth sailing because the Southern Ocean, the Scotia Sea are not very pretty either. But but I wouldn't choose your South Georgia itinerary based on the direction of it. Go with what works with your budget. Go with works with your time frame. If you have the option to go between both of them, I'd go Antarctica first. And then it's just, are you going to include the Falklands or not? I'd say 90% of the trips include the Falklands. So, it's more if you have a very tough time constraint, you might want to exclude it. And then other than that, don't think about what the itinerary says. Don't think about the name of the itinerary. Just work with one of us. Go look at it on your own and say, how many days am I on land for each of these itineraries? What's included on it? That's kind of the minutia of picking itinerary. It is not as complicated. You were going to say something, Phil, and I really, really cut you off.
No, it's fine. I'm glad you put a bow on that too. You know, I was just going to say, you don't have to have all the answers to these questions. You know, you don't have to know every single detail of the trip that you're going to take before you book it. What I would encourage you to do is reach out to someone who knows and who you can just like spitball with. You know, what do you want to see? Do you want to see penguins? Do you want to go to, you know, a certain place? There's a lot of little factors. And when you add all those together, there might just be one trip or a couple trips that really fit exactly what you're looking for from a budget standpoint, from a time of year standpoint to a destination standpoint. And there's so much out there that having someone that has broad overview of this stuff that can take, you know, your feedback through an easy conversation and then can distill it down to an excellent choice for you is a really great call. I think the service that you guys offer is fantastic and is just, you know, such a you know, useful thing for people.
Thank you, buddy. And on that note, I think, wow, I really thank you. No, really, thank you. So, no, and on that note, there's no such thing as a bad itinerary. It wouldn't exist. And there really isn't a best itinerary. I would say there are itineraries that do sort of stand out for people from, you know, in different aspects. But if you're constrained by time and budget and you have to do a 10-day classic Antarctica trip, you're going to be blown away. You're not getting a compromised experience. You're not getting a diminished experience. It wouldn't exist if that was the case. It's called Classic Antarctica for a reason. I would not get so wrapped up on it and let it be a surprise. Because on that, another note too, your itinerary might say western side of the peninsula. You might be going to the Gerlache Strait. And then you know what happens? I told that this happened on my second trip. We ran into a really bad weather system that wasn't going to clear up for like 5 days. And the expedition leader said, guess what? We're going to the Weddell Sea, right? And then if you look at an itinerary, I don't love that companies do this. If you look at an itinerary and it says, we're going to go visit Cooverville, Nico, and Orne Harbor, and you start getting those places in your head that you're going to visit there, you're already setting yourself up for disappointment, because no itinerary that anybody has ever given prior to departure has ever gone exactly as planned, except for our December 7th charter.
That's right. That was epic how that turned out. And that's a rarity, right? You can plan for something and you end up on plan, 6.3, at the end of the trip. And the whole thing is that, you're going to have a really upset expedition team if you have an office that's saying, oh, hey, we're going to go to Port Lockroy today, and then we're going to go to Nico the next day. It never happens like that. And I think the attitude and the expectation that we can have going down and visiting Antarctica is that the place is going to dictate where you go on any journey you have. You're going to have weather, you're going to have sea ice, you're going to have things that are unexpected at the time of booking. And us as travelers, we have to recognize that it's such a dynamic environment. And when we go down there, we're really setting ourselves up to observe Antarctica as it is. So yeah, your destinations might change, and you might have this list of places in your head that you think you really want to go to. And while you can express that, and while your expedition team can work with you on that to a point, there's the destination. Antarctica is the place. It is this idea and this destination that is just so different from any other kind of travel that you've done. There are no set itineraries. There is no set plan. You're going down there and you're taking in this experience for what it is on each trip.
So beautifully said, Phil. Really, it's all about, we talked about this in the beginning, the first episode together, it depends, right? And it's all about expectation. That's sort of the other phrase that I like to use. It's all about managing expectations. And if people, I always find the most, I don't want to say disappointed, but when things go wrong or things go differently than anticipated, the people who are usually notably most upset are the people who have already built up this expectation prior to going. So even the details of the itinerary, you pick a general itinerary and you say, okay, I'm going to do the western side, right? Just be open to everything after that. Okay, I'm going to go on a 19-day South Georgia trip. Just be open to that. I've seen it where you've been scheduled to go from Antarctica first and then you end in the Falklands, but the Drake Passage is so terrible trying to leave that you go the other way around. Everything from the moment you board that ship to the day you get home, everything is out of your control at that point. And just trust that the captain, the offices, and the expedition leaders are working so hard to deliver as close as what was advertised. But that's not how it always goes down. And if anything, it never goes down that way. It's very rare to stick to the itinerary as promised. And that's the beauty of this. I was just thinking about this. Antarctica is like the last place in the world where I say this all the time, it's the last place in the world where you're truly on an expedition. You really, the art is a little more predictable, but it's still pretty epic. But when you're down there, you are totally at the mercy of the nature. And this is why it's so beautiful, because when the plan changes, don't be upset, be grateful, because you're seeing what you came to see in the most purest form. There's a great saying, the traveler sees what they see, the tourist sees what they came to see. And if you can think about that mindset, and be open to just seeing whatever it is you're seeing and appreciating it, no matter what itinerary on, it doesn't matter. Just pick the one that goes for your timing and goes for your budget. Everything else after that is just, it's out of your control.
For whatever itinerary you have, and for whatever these companies are building up in the pre-work, and even the expedition teams on board, you can frame these trips however you want, but it's always Antarctica. It's always the destination that's doing the heavy lifting. And this is what we're all coming to see, and this is what we're all so passionate about. So, it's just like you said, Neil, whatever you choose, you're still going to Antarctica. You're still going and seeing this amazing place. And there's a lot to be excited about on each one of these trips.
And if you if you want to see two different itineraries, you can always go twice.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I think
so real.
I think that sort of sums up everything. And we've already come up on an hour for the episode. Nikki, do you have any sort of final thoughts on it? You deal with this day in and day out. You know, what does it really come down to? Give us a quick little rundown of what your day to day looks like when picking these kinds of things, and if it really matters.
Yeah, the titles really, really don't matter. Just think about how long you have and what your budget is. The fact is, you're not going to have a bad time. You're not going to get down there and be like, man, this sucks. That's just, I mean, you could, but that's like a skill issue. Most people are not going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Don't worry about the name. Don't worry about the titles. Think about how long you've got. Think about what things you ideally would like to see. Talk to a travel agent. Reach out to someone who has been there before and who is familiar with it, and have a chat with them, and we'll get it going.
That's it. Another episode done and dusted.
Done and
Beautiful.
Dusted.
What
What
an absolute pleasure, you guys.
No, it's fun. I
love
this.
these conversations.
Trust me, the post-process editing is really a big pain in the butt, but there's nothing better than just sitting around with some buddies, just talking about Antarctica and sharing the knowledge, right? Look, if you're in the planning process right now and you're not sure what itinerary you want to go on and it's overwhelming to you, please send us an email. Visit our website, letsgopolar.com. There's a contact form. There's a trip request form. We will help you break it down. We will save you all the mental gymnastics trying to figure it all out. It's not that hard when you realize that every single one of these trips is pretty much identical. It's just a different amount of, maybe you're going to a different region. Just reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you out. We've got some incredible deals right now. Early bird season is upon us. We've got incredible deals for some early bird stuff. These trips are filling up really fast. Nikki, you just put out another thing, like how many trips are sold out right now? Don't wait to get the conversation started. If you listen to the episode about early bird versus last minute, you know that right now we're sort of in the early bird market. That's where everything's big. If you haven't, go listen to that episode. Don't wait to get in contact. You might have to wait to book, but don't wait to get that conversation started. If you're looking for an Arctic trip, we will break down the Arctic itineraries, because I think there's a lot more to those than there is to Antarctica. There's a lot more different regions and stuff. If you're interested in any Arctic trips, we've got incredible last minute opportunities for things like 12 passenger ships. We've got bigger ships. We've got some market deals right now on the Eclipse trip is happening in August 12th, I believe. So those deals just came out. If you're not already a member of the Facebook group, go join Antarctica Travel Group on Facebook. It's the largest polar focused community on the web. We really appreciate all of your feedback, your support. Like I said, we've got like over 3,000 downloads already in our first month. It's been an amazing ride so far. I want to thank our guest, Phil. I want to thank Nikki for making time while you're out in the middle of the ocean right now. Thank you all for tuning in, and send us some questions. Send us some feedback. If you want to hear any topics on the show, send us an email. It's info@thedrakeshake.com. Other than that, thanks again. And
we've got a website. Yes.
Yeah. Well, so we have the drakeshake.com, and I haven't built the website there yet, but we have moved it over to, it's on letsgopolar.com. You can see our podcast is streamed there as well, but we do have a domain, info@thedrakeshake.com. Everybody can send in feedback, comments, questions, anything that they want. We've got a place for them to reach out to us, or just send us a message. You know how to get a hold of us. Other than that, thanks again for an incredible episode. I can't wait to have you back on the show, Phil. I got to think about what the next cold opener will be, what the next banter topic will be. It's our favorite part of the show. Other than that, if you got nothing else, anybody got anything else?
No,
just compliments to you, Neil, for setting this up and initiating this conversation. Super valuable and happy to chat. Honestly, it's so fun. Yeah, I can't wait to the next time.
Other than that, thanks again. My name is Neil Drake, and that was The Shake.
If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe. Every week, we discuss a new topic in depth. And if you have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, feel free to drop us a line at info@thedrakeshake.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.